is to me, the home I long to see. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under's blue, starry skies, where love
Welcome back, dear students, conceptual engineers, and guests. We are happy to have you here again.
We hope that you had a fantastic lunch, for we are about to put ourselves on yet another journey towards knowledge and wisdom. Once again, I am Lady Crisville Balisi.
And I am Eric Rowan Regalado, your Masters of Ceremony. To start off, let's get right into the core of this session by introducing to you our guest speaker through one of our esteemed faculty, Sir Maverick Roa. A virtual round of applause, please.
I may roam the distant land to see. I long to go back soon to sweet Bukidnon home, where lovely mountains high, with forests tall and grand, bring memories to me, the home I long to see. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under's blue, starry skies, where love and joy never die. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under's blue, starry skies, where love and joy never die.
Uli audio. Sir, we are requesting that you turn on your mic, sir, for the audio. We cannot hear you clearly.
Am I audible? Am I
Yes,
audible?
sir, you are audible but very faint lang po.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We
Hello.
request that. Yes, yes, sir.
Okay,
That's
Prof.
much better, sir. Yes, sir.
Should I introduce the speaker?
Yes, sir. You may introduce the speaker. Thank
Okay.
you so much, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. My role this afternoon is to introduce our speaker. Our esteemed speaker, Professor William Wolf Diedrich, graduated, currently teaches philosophy and theology at the Courtyard International School in Tervuren. He obtained his graduate and undergraduate degrees in philosophy and theology at Catholic Universiteit Leuven in Belgium. He will be lecturing on philosophy. He will be lecturing on teaching philosophy, focusing on epistemology and the philosophy of religion. Help me welcome Professor William Wolf Diedrich.
Um,
Hello, sir.
Good afternoon to you all.
Can you
Can you
hear
hear
us,
me?
sir? Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yes, sir. We can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, let me just start by saying thank you very much. It's an honor to be speaking to you today about my favorite subject, philosophy, and hopefully something that ignites a fire in all of you as well. Um, I just want to start off um, telling you a little bit about what we're planning for today. Um, trying to bring up a slide here. Um, so first, we're just going to start with a little bit of introduction. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, so you know who this person is that's speaking to you. It'd be nice to get to know you a little bit better, but there won't be time for everybody to introduce themselves, obviously. Um, but I did gain a really nice sense for where you guys are at from that beautiful introduction video and the lovely song that accompanied it. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think distinguishes teaching philosophy from maybe teaching other subjects. So, talking about an art versus a science. Then we'll get into teaching TOK, epistemology, and then philosophy of religion. And if we have time, maybe we'll hit a little bit on ethics. Just a note about how I'd like to conduct this session. I think it would be awfully boring, or I imagine it would be awfully boring to listen to somebody just talk for an hour and a half. So, kind of after each section break, I'm going to try to open it up for a little bit of conversation. So the Q&A part, I hope, will sort of run through the presentation rather than being saved completely for the end, if that's okay with all of you. So, um, sorry, I'm just having a little bit of difficulty with the slides here. There we go. So there you see the guy skiing. That was me when I was a kid, a lot younger and a lot thinner. I grew up in Alaska. Um, Alaska is a frozen wilderness, as you might imagine, bereft of a lot of philosophical thinking, but you get philosophical thoughts when you're out in the wilderness. I suppose, um, I suppose the thing that first drew me to philosophy that I can remember was having a conversation with my mom growing up, and I was very little, very young, and asked the question that many of us ask at some point: what happens to us after we die? And my mom looked at me and she said, well, you know, if you're a good person, then you get to go to heaven, and then everything is going to be wonderful. And if you're a bad person, you go to hell and everything's going to be terrible. And I thought about it and I thought, geez, that seems pretty awful, you know, that there's this possibility that you can burn forever in eternal fire, or you get to go on forever living a wonderful life. And I thought about, well, what is forever? Day after day, month after month, year after year, millennia after millennia. Uh, and that sort of brought me down to tears. And I thought, well, heaven actually kind of sounds just as bad as hell if you have to be there forever and ever and ever. That's that's not something I want to do. And then my mom started crying, and I realized she didn't have the answer. And then I started crying, and I was like, "Oh no, this is terrible." And then you're on the path of thinking. That's my introduction to why I became a philosopher. Growing up in Alaska in this sort of wilderness, those are the thoughts that I was having. So you can imagine with that sort of worldview, I went into seminary. I decided I wanted to become a Catholic priest. And that brought me to Belgium because there was no seminaries or places to study in Alaska. And in Belgium, of course, I came into contact with uh, many professors and people of great wisdom and imbibed a huge amount of knowledge. But I didn't feel like seminary was going to be for me, mostly because I wanted to have a family. So I left the seminary. I got married and quickly started teaching here at international schools, at different international schools. I've been teaching for about 17 years in that context, teaching philosophy, teaching theology, psychology, lots of different subjects. And I'm just wanting to share with you a few of my experiences, and hopefully some of those are of value to you. And if not, you can forget about it. It's uh, just up here for grabs. Um, I mentioned there in my biography death, and that was something that I wanted to mention only because I think there is certainly when you're teaching existential philosophy, the idea that all of our choices are eventually going to culminate in this final point where we can't see anything past. And in my life, I was very affected by the death of my daughter, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 2. And that sort of restarted my life. It made me rethink everything that I thought was valuable, things that I wanted to do with my life. And yeah, eventually ended up affirming the same things, and kind of had a life after that, a new life. And in that new life, I'm very struck by the conscious decisions that I need to make. And so I just wanted to bring that in as sort of background to me, to who I am, to how I approach teaching, and what I think is important. So that's me. Um, Now, going forward with the next question, is teaching more of an art or a science? Now, I don't want to belittle the idea that there is certainly a lot that we can learn from a scientific approach to teaching. There's no doubt that there's some methodologies that work better than others. There's no doubt that there's some practices that are better than others. For example, having an objective and knowing how you want to get there. Now, there's many different ways to do that, and I don't think there is an absolute right and an absolute wrong way, but definitely knowing what you want to do, having a syllabus, being aware of where you are within the context of the overall picture of what you want to do is super important. Um, Another thing, which is just universally true, when you want people to engage, especially if you're dealing with a crowd who's a little bit introverted, it's always good to have people, ask a question and then have them write and think on their own, have the time to really get in their own heads before you put them on the spot and make them answer questions. That's just something that's always going to work. Giving students thoughtful feedback, really carefully reading what they write, and uh, it doesn't have to be the best objective feedback in the world, but knowing that somebody is taking the time and caring for what you're doing brings out the best in students. I just mentioned those couple of things, but of course, there are loads of different scientific ways of approaching teaching that can be helpful. At the end of the day, though, I would argue that teaching is mostly an art. And like all good forms of art, there is not one right way to perform art, but you always know it when you see it, when you feel it, when you hear it. I take, for example, music. When you hear a good song, what's happening there? Why is that song good? Well, it's good because the artist in question really authentically displayed the best parts of themselves. They had something that they wanted to communicate, a type of message, and they did that in their own way. And I think as teachers, we have to be extremely open to and courageous enough to pursue the way of teaching that fits us best individually. Some of us may be storytellers, some of us may be game players, some of us may be people who like working in projects, and some of us might be lecturers. And if you do that well, if you do that in an authentic way to yourself, it's always going to come across the right way to students. However, if you try to um, if you try to be somebody else, if you try to teach in the way that you think you should, if you try to rehearse a kind of I don't know, some idea of what you think this ought to be, it's always going to come across inauthentic to students, and it'll be hard to connect. So I'm definitely a big proponent of the idea that there's a lot of different ways to do teaching well, just like there's a lot of different ways to have a good, healthy diet. Um, but there's also a lot of ways to do it badly, and the ways that don't end up connecting are always the ones that are simply inauthentic to who you are. So, um, yeah, I would say from my teaching career, that's probably the most important takeaway. When students have given me positive feedback about what I've done, it's always because I shared with them in a way that was authentic to who I am, and you know, oftentimes was willing to go off track. But off track for a reason, and that's the last point that I have there on the slide. What's the aim? What are we trying to do when we're teaching philosophy? Ultimately, we're trying to achieve epiphany. We're trying to get somebody else to really think for themselves and to have an insight into not only their own worldview, but a better idea of what the world is in and of itself. Um, I call this mimetic desire. That's a term borrowed from Rene Girard. When we want to imitate the other person, that's essentially you want to be the first thinker in the room. You want to be the best student, and you want your students to imitate that. So Heidegger said the best teacher is simply the teacher who wants to learn the most. So modeling the behavior that you want to see, that you want your students to reflect, uh, that's incredibly important. And then hopefully that leads to a kind of epiphany, which is always going to be a digression from whatever the main idea of the class was supposed to be. I have my idea of, okay, today I'm going to be teaching existentialism, for example, and I have my slides and I have my preparations, but ultimately I need to be able to depart from that at any moment if I feel like there's a genuine interaction going on where a student is perhaps arriving at an epiphany. Don't be afraid to go down the rabbit holes, because the right rabbit holes is essentially where we want to end up. The preparation that we have made for the day is merely there to get us somewhere else. We can't get there without it, but it needs to be discarded if necessary. We have to be sensitive to those who are around us in our classroom, um, to know when it's time to deviate and to entertain a thought that is going to help somebody reach an epiphany. I'm going to pause there for just a second, and because I'm not used to online teaching and not having a sort of group that I can look at and gauge where everybody's at. So, if I could pause here for a second, and if anybody wants to react to anything I just said, I'd be very thankful, and then we can move on with the next bit.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to your discussion, especially regarding epistemology and philosophy of religion. Concerning that, philosophy of religion is also one of the subjects that we are currently taking during our third year.
Okay, thank you. We'll be getting to that very very soon.
There is one question here from the comments from Mr. Emil Prokazka. He asked, would you rather feel like you have to uh, we would have to skip this question, sir, because it's quite inappropriate at the moment. But It's kind of a meme question, sir, that we need
Yep,
to be
students
discussing.
are the same everywhere.
Yes, sir. But regardless, sir, we would have this discussion after. We will address certain questions, sir, relevant to the topic after your discussion, and we are really looking forward to your time, sir.
Okay, all right, we'll keep going then. If we can just bring up the next slide. Yeah. So we'll start off with epistemology. I've been teaching TOK, which is slightly different than epistemology, in the IB program, the International Baccalaureate. So they've taken the idea of epistemology and they've made it a standard subject, which everybody has to follow. Every student has to follow. For them, what it's about is trying to make connections between the different areas that they have to study, and get them to think of higher order questions so that are related to that. So, for example, I might be teaching about mathematics and theory of knowledge. I'm not teaching math. I'm certainly not qualified to do that. But I'm asking the questions of, okay, when the math teacher tells you that your answer is right or wrong, how do they know that it's right or wrong? It's simply asking, when do we achieve certainty and how certain can we be of that certainty? Um, the TOK question that's most associated with math is math something that human beings have discovered? Is it something that's out there? Is it something which is objective? Or is it something that we have created, which just simply happens to map onto the physical world quite well? That's a question that nobody's been able to solve. It doesn't have an answer, but getting people to think about that is what we're trying to do in theory of knowledge. So looking at the higher order questions that are behind all the different subjects, but then also um, essentially coming from the point of view that truth exists on a spectrum. So in the IB, theory of knowledge is taught from the point of view that there is nothing which is absolutely certain. Uh, there's also nothing which is absolutely relative. So truth is existing on a spectrum, somewhere in between there, and it changes from subject to subject. So obviously, people tend to look at this and say, well, from a mathematical point of view, um, we must be very certain. And maybe from the point of view of arts, whether they be visual arts or musical arts, things are very much relative and they're left up to the individual. Now, there is something to that perception. However, what we're trying to do is challenge and say, well, maybe in arts, sometimes things are actually quite objective. Objective in the sense that if I'm playing a piece of music, there is a right way and a wrong way to perform that piece of music. There's a certain amount that is left up to interpretation. But if I play all the wrong notes, obviously I haven't done a faithful rendering. And there's an objective way to say that what I'm doing is not only a bad performance, but it's bad art. There's certain things that I can say in art are objective. I can look at uh, I, I can simply look at the way that somebody is faithfully trying to create or recreate a piece, to say that there's an objective aspect to that. And otherwise, you can also say in mathematics, well, all mathematical principles are derived from axiomatic presuppositions. Now, if those axiomatic presuppositions happen to be correct, then we can deduce from our basic principles. All the rest has to be true. But we never know if those axiomatic presuppositions, in fact, are correct because they're presuppositions. So there is an element to math which is also somewhat subjective. That's the basic idea with teaching theory of knowledge. And I start off the class with trying to make students aware of the fact that everybody comes from a certain perspective. So we're all trying to learn the importance of our own perspective, be aware of it, and our biases, and most importantly, our implicit biases. So we have things that we know that we're biased about and things that we don't know that we're biased about, and we only discover that through question and answer. So I'll oftentimes start off a theory of knowledge class with just asking kids, what's the main perspective through which you see the world? And kids are oftentimes not able to really answer that question well. So I break it down into what's interesting to you. What are the main things that you really like? And you might get an answer like, well, flying and music. I say, okay, flying. Why are you interested in flying? And then the person might say, well, my father was a pilot and my grandfather was a pilot, and I've always grown up with this. Okay, fine. But you could have just as well decided because everybody's a pilot, I don't want to do that. So why are you doing that? Why have you embraced that? Well, I like the idea of freedom. Okay, I have a lot of freedom when I'm up in the air. I'm looking down and I have a different perspective on the world. Okay, so you like seeing things through different perspectives. You like that feeling of freedom. That's essentially one way that that's a way that you're seeing the world. Therefore, you're emphasizing everything through the lens of what is going to make me most free. Likewise, if the person is talking about their love for music, well, what is it? You have to break it down. What is it that that person likes about music? Well, it's exciting, gives them a little bit of um, it gives them some sort of sense of uh, yeah, excitement. Okay, well, why do you like that? Well, because you're essentially a person who wants to be um, in the middle of things. You're very much engaged in the world. That's where your interest in music is coming from. So that's a perspective, and those perspectives are then going to lead to their own biases, meaning you're going to, because you view the world through that lens, those are the things that are important to you. You're also going to be judging the world by saying, well, the things that disagree with that perspective are the things that are leading to my prejudices and to my stereotypes. Um, and that then leads to the whole question of, well, what is true? Um, and we have to be aware that there's different senses that we can talk about truth. And depending on which one that we're using, we're going to have a different idea um, of what's right and what's wrong. So I apologize if this is sort of basic to everybody there. I don't know what the the background of everybody is, or but hopefully this will be of some use. There's at least 7 different ways that we could talk about truth. I'm just going to see if I can zoom in here a little bit. Um, the first and the most common way that a lot of people think of truth is the correspondence theory. This basically just means that when we say something, we want to see that that belief accurately reflects reality. Is the thing that I'm saying really there? Um, in epistemological terms, we would call this an empirical perspective. So this is the basic perspective of science. We want to see with our eyes, hear with our ears, taste, touch, whatever, feel that this thing is definitely the same thing as this thing over here. That's the correspondence theory. It's very basic, but that's what a lot of people tend to look at in terms of their basic theory of truth. But it's just one way. Empiricism is not the last word. We also have the coherence theory of truth. So that's where we think that truth comes from being being part of a greater sense of other things that cohere together, that fit together. So if a belief is coherent with other things, if it fits together with other things in that system, then we would say that that's coherence. In a mathematical system, a theorem is true if it follows the axioms that are previously established. So this is more of the rationalist idea as opposed to the empiricist idea. We want things to fit into a system, and we want things to work in that way. And then you have the pragmatic theory of truth, which is something that I'm a little bit more uh, sorry, I'm trying to fix my slide here. Personally, I think for me appeals a bit more. I don't know, maybe it's because I come from an American background and people there are very practical, but truth is simply what works. So, from this point of view, if I have a religious belief, you might say from the point of view of coherence theory or from correspondence theory, well, what does my belief actually line up with? What is it linked to? My religious belief can't be true if I can't prove, if I can't see that a God exists. But from a pragmatic theory, if my belief in God is helpful for me, if that makes my life work better, then it is true. Now, of course, there's danger to that. Lots of things could be pragmatically true, which could potentially be dangerous for myself or for others, but true in a moment. But the pragmatic theory of truth is simply saying whatever works, whatever has cash value, whatever is um, helpful for you in the moment is true because it works. We certainly have no problem with that idea in engineering or in other practical sciences. We want things to work. Why can that not be the same with our fundamental idea of what truth is? Uh, Fourth way we could look at truth would be the constructivist theory. So that says that what is true is simply true because of the social historical context in which we receive it. So we don't think of truth as an objective reality, but it's simply a social production. It's something that we're doing all together as groups of people. And so we should never think of truth as being ultimate. It's just what is, according to our social construction, correct. Then there's the relativist theory of truth, which a lot of young people, at least where I live and teach today, tend to adhere to, which says that everything is relative to the perspectives or the culture from one comes from. I think the earliest documentation, of course, it goes way back before that, but the earliest documentation that we have of the relativist theory comes from Herodotus, the Greek historian, when he mentions when the Greeks and the Persians first came into contact with one another, and they realized that they had very different ways of understanding about what to do with a dead body. When you have a dead body, that's could be a big problem. For the Greeks, it was completely obvious. What you do with a dead body is you put it on top of a funeral pyre, you light it on fire, and you burn the person and turn them into ash. The Persians thought that was insane. How could you possibly do that? They felt that that was a complete desecration of the dead person. For them, what they thought made absolute sense was you take the body, you put it up onto into a tree, and you let birds pick at it until it's down to a skeletal form. And the Greeks thought that's barbarism. That's absolutely insane. How could we have such different ideas about a simple thing, what to do with a dead body? And then the conclusion that was drawn from that is, well, truth just depends on where you're from. Some people have customs that lead them to do certain things, some people have customs to lead them to do other things, and there can't be one right way of thinking about it. It's simply culturally conditioned. Um, so, yeah, at least where I live, a lot of people believe that is the ultimate sense of truth. That you would just have different cultural conditions. No one is right or wrong. It's simply where you're from. Then we have the deflationary theory of truth, which somewhat similar to the relativist idea says that truth is a minimal concept. It's not really important. It's just merely a linguistic distinction that we make. So it's almost sort of an illusion, but perhaps a helpful illusion at times. Um, and then finally, the consensus theory of truth. So here we think about truth as just simply what most people agree to be true. So it's not necessarily that it's definitely the case. It's just that's what most people think. Therefore, it is true. Most people think that Michael Jordan is the best basketball player that ever lived. There's lots of statistics that would point to the fact That's not the case. He's not the person who's won the most championships. That would be Bill Russell with 11. He only has 6. And so, therefore, he didn't win the most. If you want to look at the person who actually had the best statistics, individual statistics, that would be Wilt Chamberlain, who averaged 50 points a game. Jordan, at his highest, only got 37, and all kinds of other things. So, but yet, people think Michael Jordan's the best basketball player. Why? Because that's what people have agreed on. So that's the consensus theory of truth. It's true simply because that's what people believe. Um, so I think going over these concepts, understanding that there are different types of truths, um, that the type of truth that we're adhering to is going to determine the sort of answer that we get. Extremely important for a baseline idea of how we do epistemology. I think there's a slide missing here. I'll pause there for a second if anyone wants to ask a question or go further about epistemology.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for that part. Most of our students and followers right now are taking notes of your discussion, and it would appear that they would prefer that their questions would be discussed later after I mean, the questions might be discussed later after the discussion. But I also have one question here again from Mr. Emil Prokazka, which is also a very relevant question. He says that given that logic's only end is nihilism, why even be happy? Emotions are just electrochemical activity in the brain that has no objective significance.
Well, why does it have to end in nihilism? I would say is the first question. Certainly, in epistemology, you can have the basic skeptical notion. Well, I've been wrong about something that I absolutely thought to be true in the past. And if I've been wrong once, how do I know that I'm not wrong all the time? So maybe therefore I can't know anything. And if I can't know anything, then yes, perhaps the point that I want to take away is nihilism, that nothing has any meaning, um, that there's no point in believing in anything. But that's not necessarily a rational conclusion. That is the end of a certain way of skeptical thinking. That's not the end point of all thinking. Um, Emotions, yes, are electrochemical activity. However, um, what an emotion is from the point of view of the experience uh, inside the emotion is not the same thing as electrochemical activity. Neurologically speaking, the same amount of dopamine is produced from eating a bunch of chocolate as kissing somebody. But we all know from our lived experience that those two things don't feel the same. Maybe if you're a big chocolate lover, you really like chocolate more than that. Other people would prefer kissing, but we don't see those two things as the same. Neurochemically, they are. They're the same thing happening in your brain. They're not the same thing through your lived experience. Um, so I think it would be reductive and potentially dangerous to think that emotions can simply be explained by things that are happening in our brain. They're far more complex than that. And yeah, how we work through our emotions is definitely important to um, if we're going to have a nihilistic outlook on the world or not. Um, well, I could go forward. I could go further into that, but I think that would be taking us perhaps into a different realm that I wasn't entirely prepared to talk about. But hopefully, that's at least addressing the question there somewhat.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir. There are a few more questions and discussions happening in the comment section, but I think it's much better that we continue on with the discussion and then answering these discussions right after your discussion, sir.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a second slide here. So talking a little bit about philosophy of religion. So a philosophy of religion, first of all, it can be done in such a way that you try to speak from a sort of detached observer perspective, but I think it's far more honest if you're always talking about the tradition that you come from and how you're approaching the subject. Somebody might be atheist, well, then they have to be clear that they're approaching this from an atheistic perspective, which allows them some insight but blocks them off from others. Personally, I'm Catholic, so when I so when I'm talking about philosophy of religion, I'm talking about it from a Catholic perspective. Of course, that doesn't limit me to only thinking about Catholicism. It's just simply a starting point from how to approach the subject. And one of the areas that I'm interested in is interreligious dialogue. So, if we approach that from a Catholic perspective, what does that look like? Um, and so, um, I'm going to share a little bit of that with you now. This is getting a little bit more theoretical. This isn't so much about how to teach this, but I'm simply putting this forward as a way of approach. Um, so the theologian Alan Race, he's kind of says, well, we have the really interreligious dialogue, at least coming from the perspective of Christianity, comes down to a question of salvation. And there's three different ways that Christians approach this. Uh, the first way, sort of the old traditional conservative way, is to be exclusivist, which is to say that um, only people who are Christians or even more narrowly Catholics are going to be saved. Everybody else is not going to be saved. Inclusivism is the idea that, well, everybody should have the possibility of being saved, that God doesn't only look at Christians, but looks to the deeds of everybody, and therefore anyone can be saved. It's just that the Catholic way or the Christian way is the best way to get to the ultimate end of salvation. And then you have the pluralist perspective, which says that if God is truly this omnibenevolent being, then everybody has to be saved, and also every religion must participate in some way uh, in that salvation. So they're not other religions can't simply be accidents, but everybody has sort of a piece of the puzzle, and everybody should be able to claim and that they have some understanding of salvation in and through their own religious tradition. And there's nothing special, there's nothing central about the Christian story. It is simply one amongst many. So if you look to what the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic magisterium has said in the past, the famous Latin phrase, extra ecclesiam nulla salus, outside the church, nobody is saved. That comes from the writings of the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. One indeed is the universal church of the faithful, outside of which no one at all will be saved. This, of course, has a scriptural basis, which comes from Matthew 16:18-19. I say to thee, Peter, Kepha, you are my rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatsoever you bind on earth shall be also bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall also be bound in heaven. So this is the famous line where the Catholic Church tends to take all of its license to do what it wants because Jesus picked because Jesus picked Peter and said, I'm entrusting you with everything. Whatever you do is my will. Therefore, the Roman Catholic Church can do no wrong. Of course, there's a little bit of a problem in the translation of rock. Rock could also possibly mean stumbling block, in which case that phrase looks very different. But in any case, that's where the Catholic Church gets its imprimatur from. So, in this idea, missionary work that the Catholic Church used to do was seen as a positive thing because it was simply going out to make sure that everybody had the possibility to be saved. That was the worldview. I would say that's the past. So, as I said, this represents sort of an exclusivist idea. You hear this in the theologian Karl Barth. He says that Jesus doesn't give us the recipes that show the way to God as other teachers of religions do. Jesus is the recipe. That's the whole thing. So he also has the famous phrase there, belief cannot argue with unbelief. They can only preach to it. Vatican I Council says that error has no right. And at best, other religions might have some salvation value, but I can only be sure that my tradition does. I'm only sure that I'm right. At worst, the way of looking at this is God really intended to make a bunch of people and send them to hell. And that doesn't sound like a very nice God, but that is the exclusivist tradition. I can only be sure that my way is right. I think nowadays there are still, of course, people who would take this position quite seriously, and there are intellectually sound ways of defending it. But I think for most people, this is a rather odious kind of view of things. It's hard to reconcile the idea of a loving God having the idea that nobody else except for the people of this one particular tradition are going to be looked upon fondly. And it just seems a little bit too coincidental or a little bit too nice that I just happen to be born into the religion that's right. And this is very similar to all kinds of tribal identities where people just simply affirm that the tribe that they're from because that's where they were born and mine's the best and yours is the worst. And hopefully this is something that humanity is trying to grow out of, although it seems to hold a continuing spell over many people. At the moment, what the Catholic Church actually professes is not what Vatican I says, but Vatican II. Specifically, if you look at the document Nostra Aetate, published in 1965, it's actually the decree on the Jews. The idea of extra ecclesiam is reinterpreted, and what we get, in fact, is the theologian Karl Rahner's concept of anonymous Christianity, meaning that people of other religions certainly can be saved. Essentially, they're Christians without knowing it. There's people who can live a good Christian life. They do that through other means, and it's mediated through other religious traditions or non-religious traditions. But by living a good life, essentially, you are a Christian without knowing it. In 1991, we have the document Dialogue and Proclamation, which mentions that Jesus Christ is a mysterious way, a reality open to all persons of goodwill. The scriptural basis of that coming from 1 Timothy 2-4, God wants all people to be saved and wants them to come to a knowledge of the truth. So previously, before Vatican II, the Catholic Church had a rather negative and unfortunate idea about their relationship to the Jewish people. Of course, 75% of the Bible is all the internal writings of the Jewish community. That's the entirety of the Old Testament. But it was thought that the New Testament sort of supplanted the Old Testament, or at least fulfilled it, such that what happened in the Old Testament didn't really matter anymore. So the church came a long way towards, really almost doing a 180-degree sort of turnaround on that. So they took away the idea that the Jews collectively committed deicide, killing God. That idea was left behind. In supersessionism, the idea that Christianity completely negated anything that came from the Old Testament or from what the Jewish people had to say, that was denounced. And there is this kind of there's a deep understanding that Jesus, in fact, is a Jew, and that fact wasn't some historical accident. It's part of the divine economy of salvation that was done on purpose. That's what God wanted to do. And that's important for our own understanding of our own history in terms of the Catholic tradition. And essentially, what this document does is it creates a hierarchy of different religions based on their similarity to Catholicism. So, how much do we have in common? So, obviously, other Christian traditions, first the Orthodox, then Anglican, then other versions of Protestants, based on the similarity of their doctrines to the Catholic Christian doctrine. And then outside of Christianity, you have Judaism, which, of course, we share much of our Bible with, and Islam, which shares some of our Bible and some of the, I say our, I'm just speaking from a Catholic Christian perspective. And then the Eastern traditions are all lumped together. So Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, they're all kind of lumped into the same bucket as being things that are very different and therefore very hard to understand. Why does the church do this? Well, because the church has the idea that truth, now going back to epistemology, is really cognitive propositionalism. In other words, I know that something is true from a Catholic Christian perspective when I have been given a statement which has been told to me by on high, by the magisterium, by the Bible, and I affirm it as being true. So I say that Jesus is my Savior. I've said these things, therefore I've said a true thing, and that's how my truth is defined. So anything which is deviating from that cognitive proposition, the further it deviates, the less true it becomes. So things can only be have a close connection insofar as that they somewhat mirror what my own idea happens to be. So this position is called inclusivism, and it takes two different forms. There's an open form and a closed form. Be careful, the open form gets you denounced. So there was a Belgian Jesuit priest, Jacques Dupuy, who was actually quite recently forced to recant his idea because the church thought it was heretical. So his idea was basically that other religions exist de jure, meaning in principle, and they cannot be attributed to historical accident. So God wanted other religions to exist. It wasn't that God only wanted Christianity, the other religions have something to do. He still said that God works in and through other religions alongside his presence in Catholicism, complementing and completing the truth found in Catholicism. So uh, even though it's Christ who's doing the saving at the end of the day, it's Jesus who is actually God. All these other religious traditions are there for a reason. God wanted them to be there. God works through them. That's the open form of inclusivism. The closed form, which is the official stance of the magisterium of the Roman Catholic Church, is that other religions exist de facto. They are accidents of history. They are not willed by God. God didn't want them around. But despite their encumbrance, God can work in and through them um, uh, in spite of their contingent existence. Um, Catholicism, though, at the end of the day, is isomorphic with the truth. There is nothing in Catholicism that is not true. Catholicism is the full expression of religious truth. That's the official position of the Roman Catholic Church. So you can ask at this point, well, if I have an inclusivist position, what really is the point of having dialogue with others? Sorry, excuse me for 1 second. Sorry, I just need 2 minutes. Excuse me.
Bring memories to me, the home I long to see. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, wonders blue, starry skies, where love and joy never die. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, wonders blue, starry skies, where love and
Okay,
joy.
so there are a lot of interesting questions happening here in our comment section. Thank you so much for all of your insights and discussions. Hopefully, we can tackle all of this after the discussion. Okay, so I have seen some questions regarding uh, Christ consciousness, who argues that from Jason Nees, that who argues that there is objective morality. Of course, this is something that we will have Sir Diedrich answer. We have Jason Ness. Jason Ness. We also have a question from Carl Kevin Tumamak. It states that, in a philosophical way, how can we explain the extra ecclesiam nulla salus? And he states that either defend or not. So, to be informed, the extra ecclesiam nulla salus is what it means is outside the church, there is no salvation or no salvation outside the church. So, essentially, what he is trying to convey here is whether or not our speaker would agree that there is salvation outside of the church. One of the things that I could really add on to this is whether what kind of church are you referring to? Is there a specific church? Are you referring to the Catholic Church? And if it is the Catholic Church, are you referring what denomination are you referring to? And if you don't believe in denominations of churches, what church are you exactly referring to with regards to the extra ecclesiam nulla salus? So before we go ahead with our discussion, we would like to thank the Amicus Sophia for the spearheading of this event. The Amicus Sophia is the organization of the philosophy department here at Bukidnon State University. And also, we would like to thank the philosophy department faculty. All of our instructors here are very willing to participate and collaborate with us with regards to these discussions and this conference. So, I think Sir Diedrich is already here.
Yeah, I'm back. I apologize for the interruption.
Okay, so I will now give the floor once again.
Yeah, sorry for that. Yeah, so going back to where we left off, we can ask the question: if I'm an inclusive, is there really any point in dialoguing with somebody else? Meaning, essentially, God is going to do whatever God wants, and God's going to save people whether or not they like it, depending on how good they are. So there's different ways of looking at this. The church says there's, in one sense, the dialogue of life, where people just live in a neighborly spirit with one another, sharing their joys and sorrows, their human problems preoccupations, that should be the only point of interreligious dialogue, or the dialogue of action in which Christians and other people collaborate for the liberation and the development of other people, so working together towards common aims. There's a dialogue of theological exchange where specialists can deepen their understanding of the respective religious heritages and appreciate each other's spiritual values, simply appreciating what other people have. And then the dialogue of religious experience, where people who are rooted in their own religious traditions share their spiritual riches, for instance, regard to prayer, contemplation, faith, and ways of searching for God in the absolute. What does the future hold? That has yet to be written. We don't know. The Catholic Church is in a state of development, I think, at the moment, but much depends on whoever gets to be the next pope, and if they're going to have a more progressive or conservative view towards interreligious dialogue. Outside of what the church actually, the Roman Catholic Church would put forward, you have the idea of pluralism, and probably the most prominent exponent of that would be the religious philosopher John Hick, who gave this helpful image of, well, perhaps we should think of God as like this large elephant, and we're all blindfolded looking at different aspects of it. And to one person who's only looking towards the trunk, okay, they see this trunk and they say, well, this is what God is. Another person might see the tail and they say, wait a minute, you have a completely wrong idea. I can feel here with my hands that God is like a tail. And in fact, what God is this much larger entity that all of us simply have a small perspective upon. We can't see the entirety of it. So nobody has the actual right idea of what God is, but we all have slivers. All the different religious traditions have some kind of way in which they're seeing the absolute or the divine, and we should all be respectful of the fact that we are limited in our knowledge. So, to put it in philosophical terms, we might use the philosopher Kant here, where Kant makes the distinction between the phenomenal and the noumenal. The noumenal is what something is in and of itself, and Kant says that we're never going to get to know that. We can't know what things in and of themselves because our perceptions only allow us one limited gateway into the world. We only know the phenomena, what appears to us. And there, if we look at it in this way, then all religions are perhaps partially right, or some are partially right, but nobody can really have the absolute view of what God is. God is too large of a concept for any particular human mind to understand. Now, the question that comes up from the pluralist position, although it sounds really nice and it's very inclusive and allows us to get along with other people, but how do I pray to a God that I know is not really God? It's just sort of my phenomenal perception from a particular standpoint. Can I have a deep religious conviction and really practice a religion if I have a pluralist position? Other prominent exponents of the pluralist position would be people like Paul Knitter. He says one of the key reasons that religions are so easily exploited for the purposes of hatred and violence is because each religion makes its claim to be superior over all the others. Namely, we make these truth claims that are absolute. And if you have one absolute truth claim coming up against another absolute truth claim, there's going to be fighting, there's going to be war. So we have to let go of this idea that any one particular tradition has some kind of special view towards what the God or the absolute might be. Pluralists take the position that if God is God, that means God must be good. They call it the real. If God is good, then God can't be willing the damnation of any single person. Therefore, there has to be unqualified universal salvation. God simply wants the growth of humans. He wants people to go from a self-centered view towards a view that is inclusive of all people. in all things. So from self-centeredness to other-centeredness, it should be mirrored in our ethics, our idea of ecology, our idea of theology. So I mentioned already there the critique of Terence Merrigan, one of my professors here at the KU Leuven. Can I have a relationship with a God that is beyond any conceptual understanding that I could hope to have? It's a good question, one that we could bring up perhaps in discussion if people like. I put forward perhaps a different paradigm, a theology of otherness. This is coming from another professor that I studied under, Professor Roger Burgrave, who was a student of the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, who your previous speaker, April Capilli, also worked on and is far more versed, I think, than me in this particular philosopher. But Burgrave, his critique would be that the Catholic religion, and indeed the entirety of Western thinking, is overly influenced by Greek metaphysical reduction to sameness. So by that, what I mean is the Greeks had a problem with otherness and diversity. It was a huge issue when the Greeks talk in their myths about chaos, about the time before there was any order. It was a multiplicity of things swirling around in the universe that simply couldn't be made heads or tails of. Rationality, the logos that the Greeks were the champions of, takes different things and puts them into the same umbrella. To use a silly sort of example, I have an apple and I have an orange. I have two different things. This is chaos. How can I unite them and make them into one? Well, I'll come up with some abstract concept called fruit. And now these two things are no longer different. They're united in my abstract conceptual thinking. And that all of Greek logic is essentially attempting to unify all things and to destroy the difference, to destroy the variance, and therefore make it something logical. And you see this represented, I would say, in the kind of imperialistic ambitions of all the different European powers going out and colonizing all different parts of the world and trying to make them think and act as they do, combining everything into a unity. The basic idea of empire founding is creating unity and destroying diversity. I would hope and think that most people nowadays don't think that this is a very helpful way of looking at the world, and that destroying otherness is really destroying what's most beautiful about the human experience. So therefore, we have to take a different type of logic, one that doesn't look to sameness, but one that looks to alterity, to difference. Um, One that doesn't look towards God the Almighty, but rather the left out, the orphan, the widow, and the stranger. And this is logic which is contained within the Bible itself. Believe it or not, the most repeated line in the entirety of the Old Testament is to do well by the orphan, the widow, and the stranger, the people who are not part of society, the people who are neglected. The call is to look after them. So rather than seeing difference as chaos, as a problem to be overcome, this way of thinking coming from Levinas says that we have to stop reducing people to things, to their quiddity. Rather, what we want to do is see human beings for who they are, not a what that can be categorized abstractly, compressed into structures of sameness. We want to let people be free of categories so that they can present themselves in their own light. So this theology of otherness, as I said, this is a particularly Jewish way of looking at logic. So in the Jewish tradition, difference, disagreement is not a problem. It's actually a good thing. And it's actually visually represented in the way that you would see something like a text from the Talmud. Here I have a small portion of that. So in the Talmud, that's different than the Torah, which is only the biblical text. The Torah's in the middle there, but around it, you have this entire discussion. This is the discussion of all the sages and rabbis and people who are biblically literate, doing the commentary. And the idea is that you can't see the main text without the commentary, which acts as a frame for which the text can actually come forward. And so we see all these other voices that are commenting on the main idea as part of the picture, not ancillary, but something which makes the text true. So the margins, according to like Jacques Derrida, make the central truth true. It's only the margins that allow that truth to come to its full intended form. So otherness is not a problem. Otherness is the means by which we get the entire truth. So an embrace of otherness. This comes from an ancient way of thinking, which says that listening rather than seeing is what we need for spiritual knowledge. When we see, we anticipate. We can already categorize, we can put into our own boxes and frameworks of thinking. Whereas when we listen, we have to be passive. We have to wait for the other to speak. We have to wait and hear what they have to say. We can't interrupt. And this is where otherness comes to us. So it's not a failed unity. It's, in fact, the way in which we learn the truth. So encountering God through the other um, implies a type of violence to my own egoistic arrangement of the world that I inhabit. This destabilization within inside me leaves me open to genuine epiphany, genuine learning. Um, Sameness might be comforting. It's what I know. Otherness is confronting. So it puts us in an unstable position, which is why people don't like it. But a theology of otherness would require a type of humility, an embrace of struggle. Uh, so breaking from our conatus ascendi, which is the way that Levinas talks about the ego, our egoistic arrangement of the world, it requires us to take a more difficult path. So how do we listen to the other? There's different ways of listening. I presented it here in sort of a hierarchy, I suppose. The basic way in which we listen is we just try to compare what the other person is saying based to what I already know. We see this in Nostra Aetate, the Vatican document that I brought up earlier, where we have a hierarchy of religions where the ones that are closer to us are the ones that make more sense because they resemble us. Another way of looking at how we listen to others is simply through tolerance. We see tolerance as a good thing. That's part of political correctness in most cultures. But it's probably really best thought of as a starting point for what dialogue can be, because it's not really interested in what the other has to say. It's just allowing the other to exist. Then you have curiosity, and curiosity is a very positive thing, as long as it's not sort of finger pointing or looking at people in different traditions as though they're part of some kind of zoo. But it's a healthy approach that leads to questions, that lead to dialogue. It's free of presuppositions. It's sort of the natural state that children go through the world, and it's the idea of trying to emulate children, which of course is something that is said over and over again in the Christian Gospels. And then maybe a step beyond that would be respect for the alterity of the other, which means I don't want to try to make the other person like me. I don't want them to try to fit into my system. I simply want to know what the other is as they are, as well as I can, to give them the light in which to present themselves without categorizing, controlling, or reducing that difference, but simply appreciating it for what it is. Yeah, so that's more or less what I wanted to say about philosophy of religion. There's lots of things we could say. I just took that particular route because that's an interest of mine, interreligious dialogue. So those are some of the thoughts that I have on it from the point of view, of course, of a Catholic position, which may or may not be of interest to others, but yeah. I think we can open up to questions at this point, or
Okay. Uh, okay, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Diedrich, for this presentation. We would like to ask if that would be all of the discussion. So that we can proceed to the open forum.
Yeah, we can proceed to the open forum.
Okay, see. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And, and ikaw, ano?
Thank you so much, Dr. Diedrich, for blowing us away with your insightful and thought-provoking presentation. I'm sure our students and guests has a lot to take home from you.
That's right, lady. I
Thank you.
cannot stress enough how fortunate we are to have this activity. At this juncture, we would like to know from our students and guests their insights and questions through an open forum to be led to us by Sir Antonio Pleto. Please give a vocal round of applause.
Hello, good afternoon. Am I audible? Good afternoon, Sir Wolf. So, we have, because of our limited time, so I have filtered at least 5 questions for you to address. So, the first 3 questions will be about philosophy of religion, and 2 questions will be from the epistemological point of view. So the first question is from Mr. Carl Kevin Tumamak, which he asked that how can we explain the extra ecclesiam nulla salus, or what we call outside the church? There is no salvation, or no salvation outside the church. So how can you address that, sir?
Sorry, the question is how can we explain it?
Yes, in your view, sir, how can you explain the concept of outside the church there is no salvation, or no salvation outside the church?
Well, I would say first of all, it's important to note that that's no longer essentially the teaching of the Catholic Church. So that was in Vatican I, and Nostra Aetate really turned that on its head. So it's clearly no longer the position. But in terms of where it came from or why historically we have that, it was, I mean, simply to I think reinforce the power of the Catholic Church to force its adherents to be Catholic and only Catholic. I mean, I think uh, people my age, I'm nearly 50 years old. You know, we still grew up with parents who would. I remember my mom; she would tell me not to play with a certain kid on the street because, you know, he wasn't a Christian and he was going to hell, and you know, you would get these kind of ridiculous statements that I wouldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine saying to my own children. I don't know where that came from, but that was a worldview of the time that there's essentially the club and you're part of the club or you're not, and if you're not part of the club you can expect bad things to happen. um, I'm sure there's a more uh, I don't know, staunch theological position that you could take to sort of defend this. I think Karl Barth, I put him up there simply because I think he's probably the best defender of that. And his point of view is simply, look, maybe other religions have some power to save people. Maybe they're good. I can only know that my tradition is sure. So therefore, I'm going to affirm my own tradition. But yeah, I think the point of view of extra ecclesia nulla salus, it's clearly antiquated. It's personally, I think it's a very good thing that the Catholic Church no longer preaches this, because I think on the whole it is a fairly indefensible position, or certainly not a nice one.
Thank you for that, sir. The second question is from Eric Frost Lencher. So his question is, how do we reconcile an unchanging God with the idea that God became man through Jesus Christ?
Mm, good question. Um, yeah, I suppose from Christian point of view, you have God the Father, which is outside of time, existing in eternity. So uh, I think one of the philosophical paradoxes is, we think of eternity really more as like time starts and then just goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. That's not really the idea of an eternal God. An eternal God doesn't exist inside of time. Now, of course, we exist in a temporal existence. Uh, if our soul, if there's such a thing as a soul, exists, it also exists eternally outside of time. So, in a weird way, if you're in heaven or in hell, you're already there. Your soul is there because it can't be other than eternal. So, what's happening here in this temporal experience is removed in some way from that eternal experience. So you have to think about it, I think, in that way in order to reconcile. Okay, you have Jesus who is one with God, but this is the part of God that experiences the temporal existence as we all do, which is completely separate from an eternal existence, which is outside of time. Um, that would be my knee-jerk sort of response to that question, but it's an excellent question. Certainly beyond my insight to answer.
Thank you, sir. So this is the third question. Um, Having a strong religious belief, do you think you would still have those beliefs if the family and culture you grew up in had told you something different from what you believe now? So this question is from Emil Prochaska.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also a very good question. That that would be sort of a relativist way of viewing things, and it's absolutely true. Of course, my own particular belief in Catholicism is completely contingent upon the fact that my mother was Austrian and she was Catholic, and that's what I grew up with. This is why I think I personally have a lot of difficulty understanding people who would be coming from an exclusivist position who are certain about um, the power of their own faith, which they accidentally historically happen to be connected to. There's nothing necessary about Catholicism that would make me believe it had I not grown up with it. To me, Catholicism is no different than being American. So I lived my first 20 years in Alaska, and I grew up American. I've lived the rest of my life in Belgium. I lived most of my life here. I still identify as American simply because that's where I grew up, but I could have grown up anywhere. Um, that's just an accident of history. So nevertheless, I admit it, and it's sort of part of who I am. It's made me who I am. So being Catholic, that's a label. Being American, that's a label that has had a huge influence on me in terms of that historical background, and I accept that. But it's not something that I consider to be uh, necessarily true for who I am as a person. So, yeah, of course, had I grown up somewhere else, I'd have different beliefs. And personally, I'm very humbled by the fact that yeah, we all come from different places. We all come from different belief systems. And that's why I think we need to have more of a theology of otherness, which appreciates the otherness as other, rather than trying to say that we all need to think in one particular way.
Thank you for that, sir. Our next question is about subject of epistemology. So, given that contemporary philosophy accepted the limits of the human brain, constraining our ability to acquire knowledge or true knowledge, rather. So, is epistemology still relevant?
Yeah, again, a good question. I think it's less and less relevant. I think we have to keep in mind epistemology really, of course, it's been around since the days of the ancient Greeks and even before that. It sort of got its modern restart through Descartes. And Descartes is coming after the Dark Ages, where you had basically thought that was completely controlled by the Catholic Church, and at least in Western Europe, in his context and his milieu. And so he needed to ask, well, what do I know apart from what the person on the pulpit with the book is telling me? What do I know on my own? So it was this desperate need to kind of affirm what are the truths that can be individually sought after and held on to. And that was a necessary project in a time where people didn't really do a lot of thinking for themselves. And of course, with the invention of the printing press and the ability to put out uh, to massively disseminate books, then we had that possibility. We had the technological possibility for people to get the book, which was the Bible at the time, read it for themselves, develop their own thoughts. And at that point, epistemology mattered because it was like, well, how do I think for myself? How do I develop my own ideas? And in this context, how do I create my own faith relationship with a person that I consider to be God? I think nowadays there's less and less need for that epistemological question, and I think it's morphed as philosophy has progressed. I think in the 20th century, early 20th century, Heidegger really brought that question back to metaphysics. He said it's not really important, you know, what I can prove or what is absolutely certain. What's really important is that I am. So Heidegger kind of takes Descartes' famous cogito, I think, therefore I am, and he says, no, the important thing is that you are, and that's what allows you to think. And he turns the question back to what does it mean to exist? What is the how do I live my life? What are the point of my choices with respect to the fact that I have this deadline that's coming up, and how do I make those choices meaningful? And then I would say at the end of the 20th century, Levinas turns that around again and says, well, no, it's not metaphysics that should really be the first philosophical question, but rather ethics, because it's fine to say it's important how I live my life, and maybe that should be the most fundamental question. But my life is a donation and it is a gift from the other. And I'm allowed to live my life because somebody doesn't kill me. So ethics really should be first philosophy. How do we allow otherness to exist in the first place, which then allows for us to consider our being? Um, so, as somewhat of a follower of Levinas, I would say, yeah, epistemology probably has had its day in terms of that being the number one science or the number one concern for philosophy. It's a morass; it gets entangled in itself. It's very difficult to make heads or tails of a lot of epistemological questions. But basic ethics is important, and I think that should be the most concerning philosophical project for us, followed then by the metaphysical idea of what it means to be.
So we have this last question, sir. This is more of a question from our department when it comes to the topic of teaching. So the Bukidnon State University Philosophy Department offers a teaching track in the hopes of producing future teachers of philosophy. So we just want to ask for your any advices that you can impart for these future teachers.
Just general advice, or
Whatever comes to your mind, sir. You want to advise our future teachers of philosophy?
I think just going back to the beginning of the talk, it's very important to remember that teaching is an art. It's not strictly a science. If there was a right way of teaching, we would all be doing it and we'd all be following a handbook. But the right way of teaching is to do um, is to teach in the way that you're comfortable, in the way that you understand, in the way that allows you to connect with others. So as I said, some people are more storytellers, some people are more game players, some people are more lecturers, and any of those can be a good and effective way of delivering philosophical content as long as it's coming out as an authentic expression of who you are as a person. There's always a I think there's a lot of pressure from external institutions that want to regulate and normalize everything and do everything according to one cookie cutter pattern, and it takes some considerable amount of strength um, to defy that and to say, well, okay, actually, my particular methodology might not fit perfectly within your system, but I need to be consistent and honest with who I am as a teacher in order to connect with students. At the end of the day, we have to make that connection. We have to let students know that we care about them and we care about our interaction, because that's how learning really takes place. Learning has to be through connection. It has to be honest, and you know, it can't be it can't be overly manufactured, because we all turn off to the idea of something which has been pre-thought and being rehearsed and just being churned out. We have to think in the moment with our students. We can't take up every single little space. We have to leave some space for unresolved issues, and we have to model thinking in front of students, thinking with students, in order to show them what it is that we are hoping that they're going to achieve.
So those are the questions that we can address for the moment, sir, because of our limited time. So, do you still want to have to closing impartation?
Sorry, the video broke there at the end. I didn't hear your question.
Do you still want to have this closing address, sir? Anything that you may add before we proceed to the next?
No, just to say a huge word of thanks. Thank you to all the organizers and to everybody who was putting this conference together. I'm honored to have been selected to take part. It was, yeah, a lovely thing to be able to do, and I wish everyone the best and hope that some of this was useful and not a complete waste of your time. But yeah, I am very happy to share with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diedrich, for sharing your insights and wisdom with us. And thank you once again, dear students and guests, for your active participation in this activity. I would like to take this moment to acknowledge Bukidnon State University, faculty of Bukidnon State University Philosophy Department, with Sir Christian Inovejas as chairperson, in collaboration with the Amicus Sophia organization, spearheaded by Sir Joe Permaninang, Buksu Philosophy Department, International Affairs and Linkage Coordinator. I would also like to give thanks to Graduate Studies, Lawang, for allowing us to use their facilities for today's event. At this juncture, we will give appreciation to Dr. Deirdrich by giving him the Certificate of Appreciation, calling the presence of Sir Chris Alsola for giving the of certificate. A virtual round of applause, please.
Thank you, Professor William Wolf.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you
morning.
very much.
Am I audible? Okay. Once again, thank you, Professor William Wolf Diedrich, for sharing your knowledge about epistemology and theology. Okay. At this moment, allow me to read the citation. Bukidnon State University College of Arts and Sciences Philosophy Department Certificate of Recognition is awarded to Professor William Wolf Diedrich for being the resource speaker during the International Philosophy Conference on Philosophy Research and Publication and Teaching Philosophy at Bukidnon State University. Given this 11th day of September in the year of our Lord 2024 at Bukidnon State University, Malaybalay City, Bukidnon, Philippines. Signed, Dr. Joy Emerasol, President.
Thank you very much.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
So again, thank you for uh, your lecture and for giving us a chance to hear you in our international conference that we organized. And here you have your uh, certificate. So we hope you could stay for a while so that we could have a photo opportunity with you, even if you're online. We will take a picture of you here in our screen so that we could have some remembrance. Would that be okay?
Of course.
All right. I sorry. So, sir, please stay for a while. We will just take a picture of you and us here. Thank you. So again, sir, thank you, no, and for staying for a while. And we were able to take pictures of you.
Okay.
And I hope to see you soon in our future activities, sir.
Sure. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, sir. So goodbye for now, and have a great day, sir.
You too. All the best. Thanks
All
again.
right.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Sir Diedrich, for that wonderful discussion regarding philosophy of religion and epistemology. We hope that our students have gained something from this discussion, especially from the questions that we have tackled earlier. We hope that these questions has helped you understand our discussion. Now, at this juncture, let us be entertained by an audiovisual presentation coming from the Bukidnon State University herself. Uh, Please do give a virtual round of applause.
Land to see. I long to go back soon to sweet Bukidnon home, where lovely mountains high, with forests tall and grand, bring memories to me. The home I long to see.
We would like to acknowledge Bukidnon State University, Faculty of Buksu Philosophy Department with Sir Christian Inovejas as chairperson, in collaboration with the Amico Sophia organization, spearheaded by Sir Joe Maninang, Buksu Philosophy Department International Affairs and Linkage Coordinator. We would like to acknowledge the Graduate Studies Lawang for allowing us to use their facilities for today's event.
Okay, so at this juncture, we would like now to call upon Sir Joe Maninang and the President of the Philosophy Society of Bukidnon for the soft launching of this organization. A virtual round of applause, please.
I may roam the distant land to see. I long to go back soon to sweet Bukidnon home, where lovely mountains high with forests tall and grand bring memories to me. The home I long to see. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under blue starry skies, where love and joy never die. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under blue starry skies, where love and joy never die.
Sorry. So again, thank you for the MCs for assisting us in hosting the event, no, for Buksu Philos International Philosophy Conference. At this juncture, we'll now proceed to the soft launching of a newly SEC-registered organization in Bukidnon. We call it the Philosophy Society of Bukidnon. Uh, to lead us in this soft launching, I would like to call our elected president of Central Mindanao University, Dr. Arnel Marte. Sir Arnel, are you there? If you're there, then I'm going to add you to the stage. Sir? Sir, you're live now, sir. Hello, sir. You can now lead us in our soft launching, sir.
Okay, can you hear me, sir?
Just a little, sir. Maybe you could adjust your audio right now,
My audio is now
or
good.
maybe you move your mic closer to you. Yes, closer to you.
Like this. Okay na?
Okay, gamay.
It's already in full volume. So, let me check the audio.
Do you have a mic there, sir?
Am I going to use the internal microphone built-in? How about this one? Hello? Hi.
We
Is
can
this
hear
better?
you a little, sir. A
A little.
little.
Okay.
Yes. Mm.
How about this one?
That's better, sir. That's better.
I see good.
Maybe you could just move closer. That's it.
Okay. So actually, my companion are still doing the ATP, but the problem is the internet connection, and there is a strong rain here in Valencia City. So anyway, let me proceed with my short speech regarding the organization. As we are about to launch this organization called the Philosophy Society of Bukidnon Incorporated. So good afternoon to everyone. Attending this international conference via online streaming. I would like to acknowledge first the faculty members of Bukidnon State University who sponsored this event led by Mr. Dr. Manina. I would also like to acknowledge the officers, consultors, and members of the Philosophy Society of Bukidnon Incorporated, or PSBI for short. I am fully aware of how hard the officers, board of consultors, and members have worked to be present during the series of meetings that made this organization possible. This PSBI shall operate exclusively for purposes appropriate in professional association, with all its activities focused on the advancement and improvement of instruction, research, extension, and innovation in the field of philosophy in northern Mindanao, primarily in the province of Bukidnon. The creation of the PSBI began when philosophy faculty members in the province of Bukidnon started communicating with each other at random, sharing their wealth of experience and expertise regarding the teaching of philosophy subjects. The three HEIs, or higher education institutions in Bukidnon, namely Central Mindanao University, Bukidnon State University, and San Isidro College, operating within the province of Bukidnon, offer the AD Philosophy program, where some philosophy faculty in the province actively participating in various conferences throughout the Philippines. They also recognize the need to address issues that affect the constituents in the province, particularly the indigenous and related to environment. So on May 27, 2024, the three philosophy faculty members of CMU, PSU, and SIC gathered in person for the very first time. It was during this meeting that the conception of the organization began. This gathering was followed by a series of meetings held on June 27, 2024 at Central Mindanao University and on August 23, 2024 at San Isidro College. Several significant individuals, including members and consultants, extended their help to facilitate the smooth registration of the organization with the Security and Exchange Commission. A significant milestone was achieved when the SEC registration was finally completed on September 5, 2024, just in time for the official launch of the organization today. Now let me share the goals and objectives of the organization. Number one, to organize conferences, fora, lectures, training programs, and extension workshops on philosophy and related disciplines. Number two, to publish journals, books, research papers, and modules on philosophy and related disciplines. And third, to foster the exchange of philosophical information and collaboration among its members, stakeholders, and the other professional societies, educational institutions, policymakers, and the public. So we, the founding members of the SBI, are fully aware that this philosophical teaching is not limited to the next generation alone. In other words, the purpose of this organization is not solely for faculty enhancement. Rather, the students from CMU, UPSO, and SIC who represent the hope of our fatherland are the true inspiration behind the creation of this organization. Therefore, we call upon all philosophy faculty, students, and enthusiasts on these three HKIs in Bukidnon to engage in the activities of this organization in whatever capacity you can. Your participation will significantly contribute to the success of the organization. We also likewise invite all philosophy faculty, students, and enthusiasts from outside the province of Bukidnon to join us in this endeavor. So I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to the men and women behind the success of this organization, officers, members, and board of consultants of the Philosophy Society of Bukidnon, the administrations of CMU, SIC, and UPSU, and to Mr. Emmanuel Revilla for assisting us with the registration process with the Security and Exchange Commission. So at this juncture, let me introduce the dynamic officers of the organization. So first, yours truly as president from Central Mindanao University. Then for our vice president, okay, we have Mr. Joker Manina from the Bukidnon State University. Then for our secretary, okay, so anyway, we have Mr. Nico Asnar from San Isidro College. Then for our treasurer, so we have Mr. Mavi Ray Roa from Bukidnon State University. And then for our auditor, because there is problem with the internet in our universities. He is Mr. Kit Dominic Pirepilla from Central Mindanao University. And then for our PIO, we have Mr. Redentor de la Rosa from Central Mindanao University. So these are some officers of this newly organized organization in philosophy. Okay. Next is, I would like to show to you the
These are the officers and the members of Philosophy Society of Bukidnon. Mapa si Ma'am Rona di ay.
Miss Casey, si Mr.
Lah.
Lete, Audio, and then also Mr.
Isa kay
Alsola,
Mapa si Ma'am Rona.
and
Yes.
Miss Rona. So to be
Rona
authority.
Makalam. Puli-puli lang ni sila ni ni Ma'am Rona kay tama na 6 lang masulod. Oo,
I see.
puli-puli lang. So, unsa man?
Can I share
Good
the
luck and God bless to us.
format regarding the incoming conference, sir?
Okay sir. Okay sir. Okay sir. We also have our board here. Kindly introduce Sir Sir Morte. Sir, we also have Sir Chris.
Okay, we have also one of the consultants in the organization with Mr. Christian Inovegas.
Yes, clap clap. Right. The ever dynamic. Ay,
Uh, can you see on the screen regarding the first conference?
there
Okay.
you go, sir. There you go. The pub mat.
Okay, so I would like to announce at the same time, and I would like to invite everyone watching here online, and even invite your friends and acquaintances to join us in the upcoming conference on November 13, 2024. Our theme for the first conference is close to the hearts of the people in the province of Bukidnon. So the theme is exploring philosophy along indigenous and environment. So we have invited some speakers to speak on the theme. And our first speaker is no other than our very own Philippine philosopher on indigenous mother and brother Carl Gaspar. So for other speakers, it will be announced later on. So we would also like to invite you, the viewers, to be presenters during the conference as well. The venue and date of the activity are posted here on the screen. You may also visit our Facebook page at Philosophy Society of Bukidnon Incorporated for more details.
Yes, sir. Okay, so thank you so much, sirs, for this great opportunity to formally establish a philosophical society here in Bukidnon. As we continue to the conclusion of this activity, let us now call upon once again Sir Joe Fermaninang for his closing remarks and for his future prospects regarding this organization. A virtual round of applause, please.
Thank you. Okay. Am I audible? Char. Okay. Once again, I would like to thank everyone for those who attended in the morning session and in the afternoon session of this Buksu Philosophy Department's International Philosophy Conference. I would like to thank our our ever dynamic chairperson, Sir Christian Professor Christian Inovejas, and my fellow faculty at the teka lang. Tanggalin ko muna 'yan kasi tanggalin ko muna 'yang ano, i-hide ko muna. Ayan, 'yan pala. Oh. I have to change the name. Okay, and my fellow faculty at the Bukidnon State University Philosophy Department. I also would like to thank the students who helped us, the Amicus Sophia organization, for the especially for some tasks, no, for coming up with this activity, for the manpower and the logistics, and of course graduate studies Lawang for allowing us to use this part of the university library. I also would like to thank, of course, the speakers, Dr. April Kapili this morning, and then Professor William Wolf Diedrich. They were from Belgium. They actually woke up very early to make this conference possible, no, for their knowledge about philosophy research and publication and teaching philosophy. I also, of course, would like to thank our other attendees to this conference, those coming outside of Bukidnon, those coming from other parts of the country, and of course the world, those who ask their questions, very relevant and very informative questions that also help us gain more knowledge about philosophy. Thank you very much. And before I turn to the final instructions for the evaluation, and for those who want to have their e-certificates for this conference signed by our uh, ever supportive university president, Dr. Joy Mirazol, I would like to again thank you and see you soon. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. All right. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And now I turn to our my fellow faculty here at Buksu, future attorney Rona Makalam, for the evaluation and for the e-certificates.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I have already distributed the evaluation form link. Please make sure that you can fill it out because it will be the basis for the giving of your certificates of participation. Again, please make sure that you can fill it out because it will be the basis for the giving of your certificates of participation. Thank you.
For the final. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Rona. We are truly grateful to have you with us all throughout this activity. This has been Lady Crisville Balisi.
And Eric Ron Regalado, your Masters of Ceremony. Thank you so much for your active participation, and we hope to see you in our future activities here at the Philosophy Department. Bye.